Well, hello. I'm gonna move my keyboard. Oh my goodness. Shannon, I love this. Good morning, Shannon. I'm bummed he's working too. I would totally, you know what? We'll replay it for him. Compliance is what I like to. What time is it? We have 2 more minutes. It is Stephanie Saturday, Shannon. All right. I think we'll get started. Good morning. Welcome to Stephanie Saturday. Yay. Um, I apologize for the crazy hair. It's kind of a hot mess. Weather doesn't know what's going on. I do like that you call it knowledge bomb, Shannon. Absolutely. Um, I swear we're going to take over the world, this group of people. So much fun. So today we're going to just talk compliance and documentation. You get the grant, now what, right? That's where a lot of people kind of fall off and don't take care of things. Good morning, Natalie. Um, it's before I go too far, get started. Today, you guys, there is an Excel sheet as well, which we'll talk about as we get through. So if you want the slides or the Excel sheet, shoot Morgan an email, the mperry@mymcpl.org, because it's good stuff, and then you can manipulate it any way that you need to for your grants. The one I shared out actually is a template that I've shared across the country so far for the PPP stuff. So same principle, and we'll kind of talk through that when we get to it. But definitely want to make sure you guys know that there's good extra stuff today. And then also, if you'll see the survey come up here in a bit, make sure that you fill out the survey. That's how they continue to get the grant funding for this program. So it's this group serves so many small businesses that I want to make sure we continue to fill out the surveys and share that out so we can keep that traction. So again, Good morning, everyone. Compliance and documentation, totally my jam. Shannon already said that's her husband's jam too. So, um, but like I said, that's where a lot of people kind of fall off. They get the grant and then they don't do the follow up, and that's so important because you want to secure that funding for later. But also, then they can provide testimonials for you. These funders, they are in groups, and so they're going to talk in amongst, hey, here's what we're doing, here's what our funds are doing, and so you want to make sure that you're sharing that information out and being a good steward because it does snowball, kind of like sales, right? So first is first. Congratulations, you get the grant. What are we going to do next? It's so exciting when you get the grant. It's like just over the moon, right? But you want to leverage this time. You want to leverage it for more funding opportunities later, kind of like I just said. The thing is it does snowball. And a lot of these funders will continue to give as long as you're continuing to grow and expand and provide these services that you're providing. They're going to continue to fund you. You may have to reapply year over year, but they're like, man, they do good work with our money, so we're going to keep giving to them. So you always want to thank the funder. That is like the reason I made it big is because that's huge, right? I mean, it's kind of like you don't bite the hand that feeds you, same principle, right? When you send that thank you, I want you to send it within 7 days of the receipt of the funds. So, so, so important. It's kind of like same principle as, a graduation gift or whatever, when we were coming up as kids or whatever. You want to send that thank you right away. You don't want it to get stale and stagnant. 7 days max, right? You need to do a letter. Don't do a thank you card. You need to put together a formal letter. It needs to be, look nice. Put your logo at the top. If you don't have a letterhead, whip it up. They'll never know. But put it in a letter because we want it to be well written. We're going to go back to that proofreading part, right? It needs to be really, really well written and clear and concise. We want to include in our letter, we want to recap that grant. Hey, thank you so much. It's an honor to serve with you. Thank you for the grant in the amount of XYZ. If the grant had a specific name, include that. Recap that whole grant, that information. But then I want you to recap the purpose of the grant. So whatever you put in your proposal to them, your application, recap that. We're going to get to serve, we're going to get to expand services. We're going to get to touch more people, whatever whatever it is you're using it for. If it's operations, hey, we get to keep 7 people employed. Add that information. It's that personal connection that we continue to talk about. I want you to include that. And then I want you to recap how you're going to use these funds, And like I said, it's, as part of that is, hey, we're, because we get to keep 7 people employed, we're going to use these funds for payroll. We're going to use these funds for, expanding a line of business so that we can touch more families by, maybe, so we'll use Shannon, expanding her line of business and be able to counsel more millennials on debt relief. And then, that snowballs, right? Because then they get to teach their kids. And so it's this ongoing snowball. And then again, thank them for the opportunity that they've allowed you to do more with it. You're 1,000% right, Shannon. By recapping this, you're keeping your business on the forefront of their brain, right? So, but thank them for the opportunity because of their generous grant. I know that sounds really cheesy, but again, that verbiage, generous grant, it does a lot for people. It's kind of like the same principle when I thank somebody for their service when they're military or a first responder. Same principle. Thank you for the generous grant because to them, it is generous. To you, it could be life-changing, right? So we want to make sure that we use those words specifically. Now, let's talk about the gritty. This is the good stuff for me. I want you to separate these funds it may sound really weird. It may seem like, gosh, I have to have a second account for $5,000, $10, whatever. Do it. It's so, so important. It's going to make your tracking easier. It's going to show that, hey, we're a good financial steward of your money. We separated those funds. You'll be able to see the usage as we go. We know what we're doing. We've said this over and over that we want to show we know what we're doing. This is the time, right? This is the start of that, where we get to prove it. And I did put on here, it's just like the PPP and the economic injury disaster loan funds right now. You got to keep them separate. Grants are forgivable money, like it's free money, right? You want to take that extra step to make sure that you can keep it separate. You can show the compliance part of it to the funder. And as Shannon said, she's a bookkeeper too. For the love of your bookkeeper sanity, keep it separate. It is so much easier to track and keep it segregated. I can tell you that as an accountant, and I'm going to spend for nonprofit for right now, that you need to think about this grant money as it's got a very specific purpose. So it's restricted, right? Restricted funds need to be separated from your regular operating funds. I want you to keep that in your head, because that split, it's going to allow for so much better tracking. But then should something happen, say that, I don't know, maybe you didn't hold up your compliance part or whatever, which I hope that none of you have that problem, but I mean, I've seen it. But say that it should have to be repaid for whatever reason. You need to be able to show that separation. I know it sounds like it's a lot of admin stuff or whatever. It's really not. Your bank can split it out. Call it whatever you want in the bank. The bank will say, Guardian Accounting Services, and then you put another label behind it, grants, restricted, whatever you want to call it. But that way you have it separated out and to keep it away from the other funds. We're going to do this for two reasons. Besides the fact that it's cleaner tracking, but then as we work through, and we'll talk more about it as we get further, but as we release those funds, those expenses, we can transfer that money over so that your funder can see a very clean line of, here's what we have expense wise, here's when we paid it with these funds. So it just really makes it a lot straighter and not a whole bunch of curvy lines. Sorry, guys. The reason we want to track these funds is we want to make sure that we, again, can show we know what we're doing, we're good stewards of their money, and that it's serving the intended purpose. When you track them, let me flip to the next screen, because actually that'll kind of pivot a little better into it. I want you to create a tracker. This is where I said that attachment is what I want you guys to get. And, Shannon, you're so right. It could be simple. You throw in a savings account, just move it over when you need it. It's the same principle. If it's a huge amount, I would put it, it doesn't really matter if it's a checking or savings, as long as it's something that you can see separated out. 1,000% right. It doesn't matter. If maybe one day our savings rates will go up and it would make a lot of sense to have it in savings. In that case, I'm down. I'm all over it. But one of the attachments today is it's that PPP tracker that I came up with. Like I said, I've shared it out nationally. I have people I have never heard of emailing me, hey, can I have your tracker? So it's a good thing. And the reason that we're going to do this, so when you get those funds, we want to make sure we've got it tracked. We've got it separated in the bank. Now we need to track it. You're going to track it in two places. Your accounting software, which makes sense, right? That's our, writing our checks, recording our deposits, all that. But as accountants, we substantiate absolutely everything. Every account should have a statement every balance sheet account. So any checking, savings, any credit cards, loans, any of that, we want to make sure that we have it on our balance sheet. When you get grant funding, we're going to create that grant. If it's a funding that's going to spread over a couple of tax years, if it's a huge amount and you're not going to absorb it in the current year, reach out to me and I'll show you how we want to do that differently. Not a lot differently, but where we put that initial deposit's going to be different. Just because it does have that lifespan, right? For all intents and purposes, we're going to, for today, we're going to assume that it's going to be, something we're going to absorb in the current year, be it 10,000, 50,000, whatever. We're going to do good things this year with this money. Like I said, if it's going to spread, if it's, maybe you got a $300,000 grant that's going to take 2 years to use, then holler at me and I'll walk you through that, because it's just a little different the way I want you to track that. But if we don't have a statement, if we don't have a credit card statement, checking statement, whatever, we need to have something to show what, a tracker. I always tell people, which is why I stay in business, right? Cleaning up projects. I can make your QuickBooks say whatever I want. Anybody can, right? I mean, it could be garbage, but for it to mean something, we have to be able to prove it, which is why we want that supplemental tracker. I do it. Also, the other reason I do it is so many people are just more comfortable in an Excel sheet versus their accounting software. Or, maybe you pull the Excel up on your phone rather than your QuickBooks. That way you have it. But I want you to consider that Excel sheet just like a bank statement, like it's your gospel, for lack of a better term. So on here, this is just a sample of the PPP tracker that I created. Any tracker you create, you're going to want to make sure you have the full funding amount, 5,000, 20,000, 300,000, whatever. And so this is one I just created a very generic sample so that I could share it out with people and they could see where it should go. If you're a PPP person, if you got that, which a lot of folks did, use this too for that. Use it for whatever. Obviously rename it. But I always want to know when we got funded and the total dollar amount. But then what we want to do is we want to back off as we use it. We're going to record that. We're going to record, oh shoot, sorry guys. We're going to record the date that maybe our grant funding is for Shannon to take on 7 new clients, right? Expand her program to be able to take on 7 more clients. So she's going to track that separately in here line by line to know, okay, well, here's what I've done for this client. I can recognize that. I want to pull that out. And so then we can know how much we need to transfer from each time. Maybe you ran bills this week and you have, $1,000 worth of expenses related to this particular grant. Then, I'm going to transfer $1,000 out of that account into my regular operating account. It's a little different if your grant is just strictly for operating funds. In that case, I would still track it to use it up, by, maybe if it's just for general operations, then, for the month of, we're in May. So the month of May, we have, $4,000 of expenses. I then put that, $4,000 of expenses and release it at the end of the month. That way they can still have a tangible proof. When you account for your grant, again, we're going to talk about it as if it's a short term, it's a short lifespan. I've seen it go so many ways that aren't good ways in accounting software. So we've kind of created a system. I've had a few auditors even over the last 4 or 5 years come to me and say, hey, can you teach them how you do this? Because our cost-effective software, Xero, QuickBooks, Sage, Wave, they're not made for this robustness, right? So you kind of have to, we had to come up with a way to be able to track the grants, show the funding, show the usage, and then any expenses or anything like that. But that way we have a nice clean reporting system. Again, you're gonna hear me say it like 1,000 times. This is short term. If it's a long one, we have to tweak a few things, and then we'll chat one-on-one. But in your accounting software, you're gonna set up that grant as if it's a customer. Call it whatever you want, but it needs to be a customer, because in your system, you can receive payments from a customer. You can have billable charges for a customer. So we want to make sure that we can track that. If you do it by customer, then later, it's by customer, but they call it job in most software. But then later, we can pull reports specifically for that customer or job, and you'll see everything, right? So it's going to simplify your process. I know it sounds very convoluted. It's like, what? So I grabbed screenshots from QuickBooks because that is the most commonly used software. If you have Xero, Sage, Wave, Holler, I don't work a lot in Xero, but I've got people who do, so I can grab screenshots if you need them. Wave is a free software. I try to avoid that one just simply because it's free. You don't have a lot of backup options, which makes me nervous because I've seen some really bad stuff happen. But, QuickBooks is the most commonly used. Sage is probably a close second. If you need screenshots from that, let me know. That one I can pull just like that for you. I have several clients in Sage, so we can work that out. But so from a QuickBooks standpoint, you just go in and enter the customer. Call it whatever you want. So I have a sample company that I always use to play and train in. So we just did grant. Square One Small Business Services. I would put any contact information you have for them. The beautiful part about QuickBooks, especially in what I'm showing is QuickBooks Online, the great part about it, besides it being user-friendly and cost-effective, is that we can attach the heck out of stuff. So I would put as much information as you have and that you can, so it's in one place. You're not having to go to like 7 different things to get to it. When you record your initial deposit, you're going to record it as if, hey, this grant, our customer paid us. So I want you to record it. If you don't have a revenue account that's for grants, which most people wouldn't, right? You're going to go ahead and create one. You can create it from the deposit screen. You can create it in your chart of accounts, but you want to have that revenue line separate. That's a good point, Morgan. You guys are the Square One small businesses in the library. There's free training for QuickBooks. It's really good training. It'll get you started and get that process going. But so I want you to set up that revenue account. Go ahead and call it whatever for today. We've called it just grant revenue. But that way you have it separate, because for a couple of reasons, but grant funds, while they don't have to be repaid, they are taxable. So we want to make sure that we can show that. If you have, when you get into your QuickBooks or something, it's pretty straightforward. If you don't have it and you're just trying to do it from the deposit screen, if you go to type in grants and it's like, hey, you don't have this account, you can just click that plus button right there and add now. It'll add it. Sage is the same way. Wave is the same way. And honestly, I can't speak to Xero, so I'm not sure. But so you would just go in and it's going to go to your bank account, which I don't have one set up at my sample company. And then here's where you're going to put that received from. That's just your customer column. So we received it from that grant. Then for the revenue, I called it grant funding. The description, I am a big fan of descriptions as an accountant, It just saves my world later. But a lot of folks don't, just because, it's more time, it's admin, they could be out making money or whatever. So your call. When it's something that's a one off, like a grant, it's not your normal revenue, I would leave yourself a note. That's not a bad thing. And then just put the dollar amounts in there. Right here on this drop down, if you don't already have that account it set up, that revenue account, that's where you can add it. So now you've got your funding. We're tracking that on our tracker. We have our deposit recorded in the new account. We have all of that. Now our expenses are coming in. Maybe you have presentation expenses. Maybe you have a contractor in for this particular program or whatever. You want to make sure that you track that when you put that expense in or that bill in. You want to code it to that customer. It doesn't have to be billable to the customer, but you need to code it to track it by that customer. Shannon just said, you guys, descriptions, it's taking a note. It saves your brain time later. What was I reading the other day that said our brains don't want to think? I think it was Donald Miller building a story brand. So you don't want the brain to have to interpret it later. It's right there. So if that's the same principle here, is we want it just to be fresh. In the expense part, I will tell you, put descriptions like crazy. If you have, some grants have very specific compliance that you have to report out. Maybe they want copies of the expenses. Maybe they want the general ledger from your accounting software. Those descriptions, especially on the expense piece, are going to save you trouble later. So definitely, please, please, please. I know it's a few extra steps. I know the last thing you want to do is admin. Do it. Shannon just said, you guys, she does the notes and she thinks of Einstein with it. My very favorite Einstein thing was that his wife used to pin his address on his shirt when he would leave the house. Or if he was going to go shopping, go to the market and get a couple things, she'd pin it to him, because all that stuff in his brain, the little things like my home address would escape him, which I just find that so fascinating. So fascinating. I don't know. I want to be that smart. I mean, that's incredible. Like, his intelligence level was off the chart. But at the same time, holy cow, I want to be able to remember where I live. But there's your fun fact. But so when you enter the description, like I said, it's going to save you trouble later if they want to see the general ledger or anything like that. But always, always, always code it to the customer. If you enter that expense, and then you go to pull reports later and you're like, crap, there should be more, go fix it. Find it, code it to the customer, fix it. It will save you in the end, but that's partly why we put it on our tracker. We're tracking all that, and then we treat QuickBooks separately so we can see those too. The customer piece, that's going to feed into a report later, and we can filter all of our reports. Almost all of our QuickBooks reports can be filtered by customer. Same with the other accounting software. So that's why we want to code it that way, so we can say, hey, I want to know every expense, everything that's gone through this QuickBooks, Sage, Xero, whatever, for this grant customer, so that that's how you're going to see that. That's how you're going to be able to give them like a general ledger later or any of that. But it's going to make it so you're not having to go pick line by line items later to try to separate it. If we do it right on the front end, take that little bit of time, 2 extra seconds to put that customer information in there. When you do it that way on the front end, it's going to save your world on the back end. So all of our softwares, when I made this slide, actually, what I failed to tell you is all of your QuickBooks files, all of them have the P&L. And I believe that I know Sage does and Wave, regardless of what version you're on. If you're in QuickBooks Self-Employed, it will not have a balance sheet. So that it may get a little tricky if we have to pull reports. So we can kind of work around that if you get stuck, holler. But if from a P&L standpoint, every accounting software should have it. Some of them call it your income statement, but it has to have it. We have to know because your P&Ls for a very specific amount of time, and it's your revenue and your expenses, right? At the end of the day, it's what are we going to pay tax on? How do we do? You know, obviously we all want to be in the black and not red, but how do we do? So by coding it by the customer is when we go into our QuickBooks, we're able to say, hey, let's jump in. And then when you see that, then when you go into it, as you can see, go into the filter, we customize it. If you're in the screen and your reporting screen, top right says customize. When you go there, this is QuickBooks Online. If you're in desktop, it's top left. But when you go into that, then you just go to filter. And when you go to filter, then you can just filter it very specifically by name, your customer, you locate your grant, and then anything coded to that is going to show up. Anything. When your grant funds are exhausted, then this is where we really want to be able to show them and give them our, like, hey, here's what we did, if your grant, if they like have a mid-year checkup, you'll use the same thing. Some of them do. I mean, just depends on the grant compliance. But if it's a grant that, is going to be a 6-month grant, I highly doubt they would. If it's that long one, like the couple of years to use up, then they'll probably want to check in at least mid-year, but sometimes some of them do quarterly reports. Now, you've used up all your funds. What next? First and foremost, heck yes, congrats. You did what you said you were going to do. That's what we have in this life right here. Show up and do what we say. We're not saying you do what I say. We're saying whatever we commit to, do it. So you used up all the funds. You've done great things. You've expanded your business. You've done able to keep people employed, whatever it was you did. Now's the time where even if it's not required, which a lot of times it's not, they just, a lot of our smaller grants that I see, it's just here you go. And people, they don't really ask for a huge follow-up. I am a big fan of oversharing. I'm sure you guys have all learned that by now. When it comes to grants, the more you share, the better. So I want you to send another letter. And this time with your letter, again, start with thank you again for all your support. Mention that, let's recap that grant one more time. For your $10,000 support for purpose XYZ. Now, and that's just your top paragraph, right? Now you're going to get into the really, really good stuff. Now we're going to thank them and say, hey, here's what your money allowed us to do. Here is tangible evidence. We did what we said we were going to do with your money. That tangible is huge. Like I said, some funders will require just a recap, P&L, whatever, even if they don't. And even actually, if they do even, I want you to go big. Go big. Show them where every single penny went. They need to see that their money served well in your organization. I want them to see and connect with you for 2 reasons. One, you did what you said you were going to do. Again, shows, hey, I know what I'm doing. I'm a person of my word. I did what I'm supposed to do. But 2, that plants the seed for next time. When you say, here's what we did. We did all this great work. I, increased revenues 30% based on what, you were able to provide. That additional information, that connection puts that seed for next time. What I've seen happen, especially in a lot of these private foundations, so like Bank of America, and you guys have heard me talk about it, has this group. Wells Fargo does too. It's all the foundations kind of sit in this pool, right? When you have people who have private foundations who fund just, organizations, we naturally hang out with people who are similar to us, right? So if you have a foundation, they're going to be in places where there's other foundations, right? Well, because of that, when they're sharing stories, when you go above and beyond, what's going to happen is they're going to say, when they're sharing over coffee or board meetings, whatever, hey, you won't believe I granted money to Natalie's business, and Natalie did the best stuff. Here, she was able to expand her growth, whatever, and she followed up. She gave us all these great things. She sent pictures. She accomplished this. She did this. In doing that, and they're sharing out how awesome she is, other funders are like, dang, our people aren't doing that. And then they're like, well, I want to be a part of that organization. I want to help that organization grow. I want to help them build their service, their line of business. That's what happens, right? We all like the good. Unfortunately, we hear so much of the bad, but we all like the good. That good gives us that warm fuzzy. Your foundation folks are no different. No different at all. If anything, they create foundations to do great things. So you want to connect with them. I want you to give them more. Magic Johnson said, and when he was speaking at the 10X conference, that over deliver. He firmly believes you over deliver always. That's why he's been so successful in his his entire life. But his Starbucks franchises are in the urban core, and Starbucks didn't think they were going to do well, and they actually do better than any of the others. Why? Because he learned his audience, but because he over delivers on everything. And that's what I want you to do. When you over deliver with your grant funding, you're going to get so much more, because just like I said, we share our successes and our wins. Same thing. You over deliver on this grant. When you apply next year for other grants, you can be like, this is what we did. We did this. We accomplished this with this amount of funds. Now you have more successes and wins to share. So we're going to, it's going to be like super open forum, you guys. So I have a lot of just kind of tidbits to share, and I'm sure you guys have a lot of questions too. But when this is just kind of one of my end slides, so we're gonna ignore it for a minute. But when totally lost my train of thought, you guys. I apologize. Oh yeah, when we get the grant funds, when we go through, there's a lot of admin that's going to go with it. So I want you to be aware of that. But at the same time, that admin time, when we take that extra time to do it on the front end, it will pay dividends. It will continue to snowball and allow you to be the best Coffee Cakes KC, the best, Natalie, goodness, I don't remember what your business is. And I know that you probably told me, was it last week or the week before? And I am so sorry. But I want you to share that, but it's going to allow you to snowball it, right? Some of the grants, this is kind of cool. If you have a blog, if it's on your website, when you get grant funding, thank them there. Let them see tangible evidence and on the internet. Some funders don't want that, but they'll be very clear with you that they don't. But I think I've seen, not from a grant though, only a contribution perspective have I seen it. From a grant perspective, I've never seen anybody say, no, I don't want, the accolade. I want you to, share that information out, because it gives the funder traction as well. But, because they obviously want to be recognized and the thank yous, but it lets people, know, and other funders know what's happening. One of the things we talked about in the very beginning is, how we talked about apply for several. Apply for 200% more than you expect because, you're probably not going to get them all. But we also talked about sharing the information where your other funds come from. So when we do that, though, and we have those separated funds, and we have the trail that we can show, here's what we did with your money. When you have more than one grant fund coming in, this gives you leverage as you build it, if that makes sense. It's going to give you leverage to share it out with people, to utilize more grant funds, to apply for more. This also, you can add this to your story. When we talked last week about telling our story, I want you to add this, that people believed in you enough that they, gave you grant funds for this new project, for this new line of business, whatever. The more we share that, then the more that other funders, as we go for other grants, are like, well, shoot, they're out there, they're hustling, they're getting this, we want to help. They want to do more. You'll hear me say it, you've heard me say it for weeks. That connection, that is so, so incredibly important. I would almost say it's more important today with all the junk than it was even 3 months ago. It's important, make no mistake, it's important regardless. But that connection is really, so many people feel disconnected right now. In several of the groups I've been involved in, that's one of the things they keep talking about is, because we're all remote, because it's so much virtual, they're just not, don't feel in touch with people. I don't want your funder to feel that way. I want your funder to feel like they've got a really good relationship with you, and then you can build on that relationship later. Does that make sense? I want you to it's about leveraging this opportunity. You're given such an opportunity when you receive grant funds that I want you to really leverage it. I think I told you guys a couple of weeks ago, my fiance is working on a grant proposal for rural internet out here because we're out, like, feels like the middle of nowhere, but we're out in Peculiar and the internet's just terrible. We literally have 3 internet services that he's tethered together, so we have good internet. And so he thought, there's a fire station out this way. There's a lot of, especially now, a lot of elderly people and stuff too that just, they can't go anywhere, right? And they need good service. And so that's what he's been working on. And he's, bless his heart, he tests my theories all the time. And he'll go back and rewatch my videos so that he can put this grant together because he wanted to do it himself. He didn't want me to help. He's doing it himself. But there's a lot out there. There's a lot of opportunity for all of us. There's plenty of money. We just have to know how to get to it. But the more we connect, the more we over deliver on our compliance side, the better off we will all be. Shannon just said that her husband and my fiance are the same person. We have joked about this for a while now. We have definitely joked about this. Well, first, let me pause, I guess. Does anybody have any questions yet that we can go through? Because I'm going to flip back to that tracker. We can kind of talk about this. How many of you guys got any of the PPP funding? There was a big push for the self-employed and 1099 folks got a bunch of funding this past week. Like I said, that's kind of where this this tracker kind of, I've always tracked grants, in a very, in an individual spreadsheet, same principle. So, I've always supported my documentation with that. But whenever this PPPs become such a big thing, so many folks were kind of in the like, oh gosh, what do I do phase, that I wanted to, create something that was user friendly that I could share out with everybody. And it's funny. Yesterday I was talking with a client who they have grant funds and some of it's very restricted, for the purpose or whatever. They're a nonprofit. And I shared this out with them earlier. And I said, well, here, let's use this. Let's tweak it or whatever, because they didn't get the PPP. They didn't go for it. And they were like, oh, this is fantastic. Do you share this with other people? I share it with anybody who wants it because it just makes sense, and it makes life easier, especially when you have anything restricted. So Shannon's question, you guys, was that we probably did cover it in an earlier video, but where can people find grants to apply for? It's a great question. It's so funny. You can go literally just type in, grants available in Missouri, grants available in Atlanta. You can go to Bank of America has it's Bank of America philanthropic website that you can go to, and all of their foundations are through there. Lots and lots of options out there. I'm always hesitant to pay for a list of grant applications available. So I do want to make sure that I remind you guys of that. Natalie, for sure. So congratulations. You got the PPP and the EID out. That's huge. Definitely want a tracker. So I'm going to rabbit trail for just a second because you did get that. And what I want you to know, if you have employees, the part you can transfer is the gross wages, not the net checks. The net checks will short you. Same for you, Ron. I want to make sure you guys know that. That's what I've seen a lot of with this one and I'm so sorry, you guys, that I'm rabbit trailing, but it is compliance and documentation. But transfer that gross wage piece, because that's what's going to cover like the FICA and Medicare. That's why you're not deducting it and you're not really reimbursing for it, because you're taking it on the front end. So do holler at Morgan for this template, because it's going to make it so much easier, you guys. And what you can do is just literally payday 5/1, you were funded on 4/28, then you put that line in there and just track it down. I want you to make sure that you have it. Shannon, look at this. The library has a grant database for free. Heck yes. Definitely check it out, you guys. But Ron and Natalie, one thing that I'll kind of point to it. If you guys have insurance, obviously it's only the employer part. If you have, thank you, Natalie, because I rabbit trail terribly. If you have 5 employees, Ron, and you pay 30% of their medical insurance, that's the part you can get reimbursed for, is the part you pay. Don't transfer based on the whole bill amount. That's already caught quite a few people I've seen. So I've had them back out. And then the state unemployment tax, not the federal unemployment, but the state unemployment tax. The reason they're doing the state unemployment tax is because that's the higher one. The federal unemployment tax is so much lower because you get that huge credit based on having state unemployment. So make sure that you have that kind of in there. What you can do, the other thing that I've done with this tracker, go ahead and project it out. Ron, you have 5 people, so maybe kind of where you think, your workload for the next 4, 5, 6 weeks. Project out when you're going to use up those funds. That way you can kind of, okay, do we need to add another project in week 5 to use these funds up? Maybe we need to work some overtime in week 5 so that we're not left kind of holding the bag on these funds. It'll help you kind of plan that out, if that makes sense. Do you guys have any questions about that? um, the KC grant list, yes, the KC source link is huge, you guys. I am on that website. I would say at least every other week, just because, I mean, it gives me such a great pulse on what, especially because I'm not in a lot of these meetings anymore because I'm stuck at home. So please, check it out. Shannon, I'm not sure in Atlanta what is available. I'm going to make myself a note. Hang tight. Atlanta grants. I will look though, Shannon. I've got some contacts there still with like NeighborWorks and Habitat that they'll have some grant resources available. So let me do reach out because I want to make sure that I get that over to you. I can't believe I haven't thought of that sooner. I'm so sorry. Again, you guys, though, congratulations on your PPP funding. That's big. The other thing I want to make sure that we talk about, since we are talking PPP, do use the tracker and be very diligent with those funds. Those payments are crazy. Yes, it's only 1% interest, but whatever you got funded for, they're cramming that in an 18-month payback. I have a client who got funding. It was a little over $1 million. That payback is astronomical, you guys. So I want you to be aware of that. I have another client they got like 250, and their payback's $14,000 a month. So if we plan right and do it right on the front end with the tracker and make sure that we're really clean and concise with it, we won't have to pay that back. So I want you to kind of keep an eye on that. Shannon, you're so sweet. It is a good question. And one of the things you guys we shared out there, kind of like what the next few weeks courses will be. And we will totally do a recap of, you have all this information. We've gone through every step of the way. Now let's put it back together. And what do we do next? How do we just go through a process? One of the things I think I'm working on with that is I'm actually, as we go through the class that day, we're going to fill out for a grant. If nothing else, I'll provide, free accounting or something. I'll come up with a purpose for it, but so that we can put it to good use, obviously. But we'll go through it together because I just want to make sure. There's so much that goes into it. Can you do it yourself? Yes. Do you need to hire a grant writer? Not always. If you're doing, and if you're requesting $1 million grant to, I don't know what, if you're a nonprofit requesting like $1 million grant, sure. Yeah, I'd say have a grant writer. But we're in the small business space, and the grants we're going after, help us increase our value and help us serve more people in our communities. That you don't need a grant writer for. That you need to have a heart and tell your story. You don't have to hire a grant writer for that. So I just want to make sure that we keep everything available for people. The more people we serve, the better we all are. At least that's my theory. That's always my theory. Let's see. Do you guys have any other questions? We can I'll pull up, see what's new on KC Source Link while we're here. For those of you who maybe didn't get the PPP yet, I do know that AltCap here locally was just approved to be an SBA lender. That's huge, super huge. They're so easy to work with, and I just love everybody over there. So if you're in the Kansas City area and you haven't gotten the PPP, go set up an appointment to go talk to them. I think, Shannon, I totally get it. Shannon said she loves having the information and knowing the process, but she'd probably hire it out or at least have somebody help. And she said the value of having someone like me in the process can't be overstated. And I totally appreciate that. That is one of the things that we don't really promote a ton in our business model, that, hey, we can help you write grants. But for anybody, any of my clients that are going through stuff, or, wanting, hey, thinking about, that's why I always work with people. I want to know your goals, even as a human, if you're not a client, let's talk about your goals, because, maybe I have that nugget of information that I can share with you to help you get there. And so the grant piece is the same way. Definitely the same way. You guys, and Morgan posted on here too. If there's something you guys want to see in a class, let us know. I mean, here's the reality. If I don't know it and don't know, don't have the information, I'm either going to figure it out for you, or I'm going to find you somebody who does, and Morgan has so many connections. It's insane. Okay, Ron, great question. Ron said it's super helpful. Besides the tracker, what other documentation might be needed for the forgiveness? It does come specifically from your lender. Here's the thing. I'm trying to remember whose bank it was that said this the other day too. They said it's like flying the plane and building it at the same time. The lenders don't exactly know what they're going to have for the forgiveness. You're totally fine. Don't apologize for the PPP. They don't know. But having a tracker, what I tell all my clients, we go ahead and pull the reports to substantiate what we're transferring. So we have a separate file, whether you use Google Drive, SharePoint, whatever, a separate file of copies of every payroll report during this period that you're transferring from, any utilities you paid. I want copies of that in that folder. And then your tracker is going to be your lead sheet. So that packet of information will go to the bank. The banks are still, I've heard a lot of talk about, is there going to be like not really an application, but a form to request the forgiveness. And I totally expect they'll have to. I can't imagine how they wouldn't. So I'm sure that should be, I think the SBA should create it, to be honest with you. And that way it's universal. But that's still to be determined. They're talking about it. They're going back and forth. Right now they're talking about even the terms for the forgiveness, that they may tweak that a bit. So, I check in on that every other day or so just to see if anything's changed, because, it does. But keeping that tracker, because that's going to be your lead sheet for everything. And then keep your documents by line of that tracker in a folder, so that when we do find out, here's the form or whatever, then you have it all handy and ready to go. You can just fill out the little bit of information that would be requested on the form and push it to them. Give them more than they ask for. Give them everything. But again, it's the same principle as the grants we're talking about. If you have all that support in a file ready to go, then, because it's likely going to be a small window when they announce that the forgiveness information, it's going to move quick. So, but if you are ahead of it on the front end and have these files ready to go, then when they do announce it, you can just push it back. It's a really good question, Ron. Really good question. You guys, one of the things that I see on the KC Source link right now too is they're talking about reopening businesses and stuff too, and just kind of how to get that plan together. So this is going to be really good. Thanks for joining, Shannon. And Ron, you're so welcome. Truthfully, if you have questions, if you think of something afterwards too, reach out to Morgan. She'll put you in touch with me. I've been trying to go live and kind of talk about it, and keep the information current for people. The big one right now is the self-employed PPP funds and how that forgiveness is going to work, because nobody knows. And that one, I'm really worried about small businesses who are like Schedule C or solopreneurs. I'm really worried about them. I don't want them to get caught and not qualify for forgiveness because the SBA hasn't, put clear guidance out. So that's why I try to stay on top of it every couple of days. Just so much changes. And you guys, one thing I will say too, sorry, another rabbit trail, is that with not just with the grants, but even with loans, that you guys may have for a very specific purpose, the same principle when you're applying goes for this. If you can give them a well written plan with your application, it helps because most of your loans are going to go to a loan board anyways, right? Your bank boards, or maybe it's a CDC lender or whatever. Most of those folks, they sit on a board and they go through them. I don't know if I assume AGDC still does it. I haven't talked to anybody over there in quite a while, but they used to do that. I know AltCap does a lot of loans for businesses, small businesses and startups as well. So make sure that having this information together, whether it's for a loan or a grant, it can only help you. It can't hurt you, if that makes any sense. Does anyone have any other questions? Here, we'll go to kind of some last housekeeping. Again, you guys take the survey. Without the survey, they don't have a way to kind of track, right? And this is a perfect example of grant funding. Email Morgan for the slides. She's mperry@mymcpl.org. She's got the PPP tracker as well, for those of you who have the funding. But grab it, and it just gives you a good base to start with anyways for any other grants that you would be tracking. And as always, the Ewing and Miriam Kaufman Foundation, we wouldn't get to do this if it weren't for them. Like I said, it's a perfect example of grants, right? To me, I love that. We've been able to break what's the word? Like the mentality, if you will, that grants are only available for nonprofit. I have had so many conversations since I started this, and Morgan was like, "Hey, would you be willing to do this?" And the more we talked about it, so many conversations with small business owners and just giving them resources. Hey, try this. Hey, check this out. Because that's such a big deal. It's like I said, there's so much money available. I know like Facebook had the grants, which they're not in our area, but there's so many options available even outside of the pandemic. That's what started it. But even outside of this crazy pandemic, there's a lot available. There's a lot of people who want to, almost like an angel investor, if you will, but that want to give. To me, it's a big deal too. Giving back is really important, and being able to help a small business leverage and grow and just do more. That's like the greatest gift ever. So I'm really glad we've been able to kind of shutter that mindset that you only nonprofits can get grants. That's really big. Christy, it looks like Morgan shared that link out again for you. And you guys, as always, if you have questions, if there's additional information, reach out to Morgan. She'll put us in touch. I would definitely love to help in any way that I can. I just really love what we do here, guys. If anybody has any other questions, I can stick around for a minute. It looks like we don't have any yet. Again, fill out the survey, you guys. If you have it, seriously, if there's something you're like, hey, I really want to go back, let's visit this again, let's do it. You just let me know. Well, I think that's it, you guys. Have an amazing weekend. if you come up with questions, send them over to Morgan. Let's get them answered for you. And, definitely let's connect. Reach out to me on Facebook or whatever. Let's connect. And I'm happy to be a resource in any way that I can. Awesome. Have a great